Hello and welcome, members of the Wandaverse. I'm Hannah, and you're listening to episode 5 of Into the Wandaverse, your number one source for all things Scarlet Witch and friends. Hey there, traveller. If you're new to my little hex, I'm Hannah, and I'm a collector of all things Wanda Maximoff. Don't worry, that includes comic, MCU, animated, and really anything related to our Scarlet Queen. I've been posting on TikTok and Instagram for about a year and a half now about Scarlet Witch news, history, and merch. But I love to yap, and longer videos don't always appease the great algorithm gods. So now here I am, in my best friend's apartment, with producer Nick beside me, and a fancier microphone than I could have ever imagined, ready to tell you all that I know about Wanda Maximoff. I'm here a little bit sooner than usual. We've had a few delays with editing, so I'm spoiling you for the delay in episodes, with 2 episodes in very quick succession. I hope you don't mind the little content overload, but it's been jam-packed with news this week. This week's episode also covers Wanda's return to the Avengers and her very first experience with witchcraft, as well as her first little love story. But before we get into all of that, let's do our Wanda Song of the Week. This week, I've selected Coins by Reagan. Reagan is one of my favourite indie artists, and I feel like this song goes really well with Age of Ultron Wanda's attitude. It's kind of punky, a little bit grungy. If you have a suggestion for Wanda Song of the Week, please DM me over on Instagram, and if I end up picking the song, I'll shout you out on the podcast. The biggest news that we've gotten in a long while is coming from Deadline, who have confirmed that the shooting for Vision Quest will begin next year in the UK, and that the show will release in 2026. They've also confirmed that James Spader will return as Ultron, but most excitingly, they're reporting that it's likely that Elizabeth Olsen will return as the Scarlet Witch. This makes a lot of sense, since the show is supposed to be White Vision trying to process his memories and figure out who he is, and Wanda's a pretty key part of his backstory. As an Edinburgh local, I'll be praying that they return to shoot here and that we might get a look into how Wanda and Vision fell in love. It's been floating around for a while now that a casting call went out for Viv Vision, so I imagine we'll be seeing Vision's other family featured in the show as well. But as the show is supposed to complete the trilogy that began with WandaVision, it's likely that since we've said goodbye before, it stands to reason that we'll say hello again. In other news, the Agatha All Along promo is kicking off, as are the tie-ins. So far we've gotten brand new banners, posters and a promo slogan, which is from the twisted minds that brought you WandaVision. We also got the news that Mary Liveness will be on the Marvel official podcast to discuss Agatha next week, and that Catherine Ham will be in New York to discuss the show with Josh Horowitz on September the 13th. The very first brand collaboration and first Agatha merch in general is a wellness box with the brand Apothecary. It's available now on their website and is actually shipping to over 100 countries, which is a welcome change from limited releases. Hopefully this is the first of many collabs that we'll see coming out. This week also marked the release of the Scarlet Witch Loungefly collection in the Disney Store, which included a bag, spirit jersey and ears. The collection's a little bit pricey, but it's been really nice to get some new merch released for Wanda, especially with this one being Multiverse of Madness based. If you're interested in seeing a real and honest review of the products, I have one posted over on my TikTok and Instagram. I'm really hoping that this is the first of a range of Multiverse of Madness merch to drop, since we've had so little since the movie's release. The Scarlet Witch is still on Avengers Campus in Disneyland, so I have a feeling they're letting her be very closely tied to the release of Agatha All Along. It's worth noting, Disney, that now you have your Scarlet Witch collection advertised as a bestseller on your website, something to consider when deciding who gets more merchandise made of her. Indeed, the collection seems to have sold out already on the EU website, so I recommend grabbing it as soon as you can off the UK website and as soon as it releases on the US one. Issue 3 of the new Scarlet Witch comic run was also released this Wednesday, and I absolutely loved it. This issue saw the return of Lore, one of my favourite Scarlet Witch villains from the 90s, and Wanda's return to the land of the living. This issue is split into 2 major storylines, Wanda battling her way through the witch's underworld in order to revive herself, and Pietro, Lorna and Darcy fighting against the Griever to save Lottakill. I have to say how visually stunning this comic is. Russell Donterman has really outdone himself with how gorgeous his character designs are in this story, and I can't wait to get my hands on his art book that's on the way. I feel like I need every single panel of Lore framed on my wall, and I can only hope that he gets to keep drawing the women of Marvel for a very long time. It seems that this issue might have given us a taste of what Agatha All Along will be like in terms of the journey that Wanda takes back into the land of the living, with her facing off against many deities of witchcraft seeking to drag her down. Some details I loved from this issue are Pietro calling Lorna his sister, Darcy taking an active role in the action by going and finding the Hex Finder, and of course the tease of Witch's Road. In our final piece of news, the new Scarlet Witch book, What If Wanda Maximoff and Peter Parker Were Siblings, releases this week. So on the next episode, you can expect a full review of the book. And if you guys want a bonus episode where I spoil its contents for all that are interested, let me know. I'm so looking forward to having a proper novel that focuses on Wanda. I can't wait to find out if the story is every bit as fun as the premise. Now, let me take you back to the 70s, where Wanda is done standing still and is about to have a plotline of her own. If you'll remember, we last left Wanda powerless and travelling with Quicksilver and Toad, and we begin our tale with Pietro breaking into the Avengers headquarters. You know, I really do feel like the Avengers need to tighten security, because this isn't the first comic that has begun like this. He scares the absolute bejesus out of poor Jarvis, who tells him that the Avengers aren't here at the moment and are in fact seeing off Hank and Janet on a scientific mission. Pietro speeds off, and after some confusion that leads him to fighting the Avengers at first, he explains why he was in such a hurry to find them. The Avengers team at this time is made up of Captain America, the Black Panther, and Clint, but as Goliath rather than Hawkeye, and then the Vision. As you can see, one little lady is leaving, so there's always room for a new one to take her place. Pietro explains that after leaving Magneto, he, Wanda, and Toad decided to go and do something new to try and help Wanda get her powers back. I guess the old go and stand near Wendigo Mountain trick they did before wasn't cutting it. Instead, they decided to read some ancient books of magic. When the original libraries they're trying fail, it's Toad for some reason who knows where they can find some magical book that might be of use. I was unaware that Toad was known for having such contacts, but I guess you shouldn't judge a henchman by his cover. It's also worth noting that Pietro takes after his daddy in his dealings with Toad, calling him a blithering fool despite the fact that Toad is actively trying to help them. They follow Toad to a place that spectral tones chill Wanda to her marrow, but they still decide to go inside. They're still not having a lot of success until Pietro comes across a book that calls to him and Wanda. I love these panels because Wanda is poring over the pages of this book in full-on witch mode. I would love if we got scenes like this in a cartoon or in the MCU. The spell, however, does not result in the return of Wanda's powers. Instead, it summons a man from another dimension who goes by the name of Archon. Iconically, when faced with Archon roaring in her face that he is demanding silence as he is the Lord of Warlords, the first among warriors in the universe, Archon the Magnificent, Wanda calmly says, "You are also Archon the Fool, if you think that a few high-flung words will cow us into silence. I know you caused Pietro to find that volume and caused me to read that spell, and I mean to know how and why." Honestly, it's moments like this that really prove what a badass Wanda is, because she stands almost powerless, and yet she is calmly standing her ground in front of a guy who she just summoned from a book. The gag is that Archon declares that his first reason, though not his only reason for coming to Earth, is that he's chosen Wanda as his mate. That she's even lovelier in person than she is afar. I believe he's low-key speaking for all of us there. Crossing dimensions to marry Wanda is something that I think most of us would take part in. Of course, Toad and Quicksilver try to prevent Archon from Scarlet napping Wanda, but it's no use. Archon easily overpowers them. Archon tries again to persuade Wanda to come with him and be his queen, but she's not for moving unless he explains how he knew that her and her brother were mutants and that she's lost her powers. She said, "Backstory, or you're not hitting this." So Archon explains that he hails from a noble lineage on the extra-dimensional world of Paul Machu, where warfare is the main thing that anyone cares about. He explains that his world was gifted with eternal daylight due to an energy ring that existed around the planet. However, one fateful day, that ring vanished, and for the first time, Archon's world experienced darkness. After a while of everyone knocking around and panicking in the dark like sad moths, light briefly returned. Trying to find out what the source of light was, Archon's chief scientist explained that it was Earth's use of the atom bomb that brought about the new life source. Bit of a heavy topic for a mid-Cold War comic. So now the continuation of life on his planet depends on either there being yearly nuclear explosions on Earth or an explosion so big that it would destroy the planet. Having given her his backstory, Archon vows to destroy the Earth, and then as Quicksilver finally gets back up for round 2, Archon sends himself and Wanda back to his own world. The Avengers actually don't believe Pietro's story, probably because of his recent return to the dark side. However, luckily for him, just as the Avengers are about to start closing ranks, a news bulletin interrupts them. A man with lightning bolts has appeared at a conference of the world's foremost scientists and kidnapped a few of them before disappearing. With the Avengers horrified, we move on to our next issue, named The Day the Earth Exploded, which features Archon climbing on a tower holding Wanda as the Avengers seek to stop him. It's a little bit giving King Kong. This issue is actually an all-star event and a fun read for any Avengers fan. I'd actually love to get my hands on both issue 75 and 76 because I feel like they're such pivotal ones for Wanda's development. We start slower with the Avengers attempting to build a device called the D Machine, which they hope will allow them to travel between worlds. However, the first test is a flop since the entire thing explodes, which makes Quicksilver go nuclear because he's worried that while they're doing Back to the Future, Wanda will end up married to Archon. The Avengers are not happy with his little outburst and basically tell him that he needs to drop his attitude or he'll never be an Avenger again. Honestly, these guys should read some of their own issues. They all act like this. The toxic masculinity in the Avengers in the 60s and 70s was absolutely intolerable, and Wanda, Natasha, and Jan should be financially compensated for being near to it. Speaking of Natasha, she visits Clint, who apparently gave her a secret key to the Avengers building, and tells him that this will be the last time they'll ever see each other. I assume probably because of that ugly headband he's wearing. He asks her why, and she won't tell him. He says that the only way he'll let her go is if she tells him that she never loved him, which she does with tears in her eyes, thus once again ending Clint-Tasha. Archon isn't faring any better in his attempt to get Wanda to accept the fact that she's going to be his bride. As they ride through his world on some sort of giant lizard, Archon tells her that to imagine that his dark and barren land as a kingdom that she will someday be the queen of. Wanda, ever the realist, is like, dude, you want to destroy my entire planet and you expect me to fall in love with you? Also, he hasn't managed to use her name once, just Witch and Beauty. Archon's solution to this issue is that as her world turns to ashes, Wanda will have no one but him to turn to. It's giving dark romance. It's giving deranged. Wanda explains that she will never learn and she will only loathe him. Archon says this isn't really a problem because Wanda's still a baddie. Well, not in those exact words, but something along those lines. Wanda asks him if he's ever experienced human kindness or pity, but like some incel on Twitter, he tells her that such things are for women and old fools. Meanwhile, his people have been experiencing issues getting the scientists to build a device to blow up their own planet. Archon drops Wanda off with a set of handmaidens who are to fulfill her every wish as long as her wish isn't to escape, while Wanda is still somewhat of a damsel in distress in this situation, since she is at this point completely powerless. I've got to say I find this situation more tolerable than other times she's been reduced to a more passive role, purely because we get to see the strength of her character. At no point does she show fear or any inclination of giving in to Archon. Instead, she is resolute, and while physically unable to fight back, she constantly challenges him verbally. After depositing Wanda, Archon scurries off to find out how to make the scientists blow up their own planet. He first runs into Toad, who decides to play traitor by pledging that he will do Archon's bidding if he sets him free. See, Toad, I tried to say you're treated unfairly, and then you have to go and act out like this. Please stop being such a snivelling worm so that I can feel sorry for you properly. Bro is literally offering to sing Archon's praises from dawn to dusk, but Archon isn't having it, and he says that he cannot abide such spineless whimperings, which I have to admit is kind of a serve. Archon is impressed that the scientists have not yet cracked under the threats of brutality from his men. However, he says he does have ways to make them talk. When one of them says that his men have failed, Archon becomes enraged and forces the scientist into a machine that can extract the knowledge straight out of his head. Oh no, he's gonna do it, lads. He's gonna blow up the Earth. Though he confesses to his chief scientist that he needs to lie to Wanda and make sure that she believes he's changed his mind. He does indeed tell Wanda that he's found a way to save the light in his universe without blowing up the Earth, and she tells him how happy she is, then asks him to please return her to her own world so that she can try and make her powers work again, and then maybe have a life. But of course Archon says no, but as a consolation prize, he takes her to see the fabled flower of life which grows in his palace walls. Apparently, it is to be picked by the betrothed of the ruler of his world and worn on her wedding day. Wanda picks the flower and says it reminds her of a poem, which happens to be one by Albert Tennyson, which goes like this. Flower in the crannied walls, I pluck you out of the crannies. I hold you here, root and all, in my hand. Little flower, but if I could understand what you are, root and all in all, I should know what God and man is. It turns out to no one's surprise that Archon isn't really a poetry guy. He declares that he doesn't understand the poem because how can a flower hold the secret to the cosmos? Wanda, it turns out, really likes himbos because her response to him is, "Oh, Archon, Archon, you are so brave and noble in your own way. Perhaps I could love you, even be happy as queen of your world, if only you weren't so cold and distant as the stars." This shows the clear importance of giving your girlfriend flowers, everyone. See how it really changes her perspective on things? Archon is really into this and responds that perhaps Wanda can teach him to be what he's never been before. And as they're about to seal the deal and kiss, the rotten, muddling Avengers show up. Wanda guesses that her brother and teammates are about to crash the party and is legit rolling her eyes in the background, like, not now. Asking Archon to let her talk to her friends rather than charging in. But she hasn't had the chance to help him unlearn toxic masculinity yet, so he declares that he does not hide behind the skirts of a woman. It shows how little attention men really pay to what you're wearing, since Wanda is actually rocking a bathing suit and cape, thank you very much. The Avengers are joined by Thor and Iron Man because, let's face it, they need the backup on a strange world, and they find themselves faced by an entire army of warriors who low-key look like they might kick their asses. It's Thor's hammer that allows them to break through the barrier, and he's raring to go despite Vision and Cap's caution. Of course, Pietro isn't willing to knock about and wait for a plan, worried that Wanda might at any minute get married, so he heads right into the fray after Thor, leaving the others with little choice but to get stuck in. The Avengers actually start winning the battle, and Archon is enraged, so in a villain move, he decides to dash the Avengers' spirits by, you guessed it, blowing up the Earth. Wanda is not happy about the betrayal and confronts Archon, but he claims that being a king makes him above lying. Miss Witch is about to start a 10-page series of Who Did I Marry when the Avengers come crashing in, with Clint charmingly declaring, "Don't let it get you down, Witchy. After all, you're only a female." All me and my homies hate early Clint Barton. Archon grabs Wanda and zaps her back into her own universe on the top of the Empire State Building, thus giving us that King Kong reference from the cover. The Avengers race to stop Archon, and as they fall one by one, Wanda and Vision meet each other for the first time and exchange their first ever dialogue, where Wanda basically says, "Flee, whoever you are, you can't stop him." That relatable moment when you tell your future husband to run away because your current fiancé is trying to blow up the Earth. Just as the last Avenger falls and Archon is about to activate the H-bomb, his scientific advisor appears in the sky and tells him that he doesn't actually need to kill anyone anymore because Thor has managed to bring light back to their world with his hammer and some help from Iron Man. So that's okay then. Archon does a full 180 and is like, yeah, I'm a man of peace now. I'm actually super grateful I don't have to kill anyone because somebody, Wanda, told him that all life is sacred. As he prepares to leave, Wanda says, "But what about me? What am I supposed to do?" And he replies that the crossing of worlds has restored her powers and that he no longer wishes to marry her against his will, and that she's taught him so much, and he hopes they'll speak again one day, but for now, he gotta go his own way. As he fade away, Wanda watches sadly as Thor and Iron Man appear in his place. Same sis. Pietro notices that Wanda is quiet with her cloak wrapped around herself and asks her what's wrong. Wanda replies that nothing is wrong. Nothing at all. But as the other Avengers walk away, happy with their day's work, she continues to stare at her flower. Nothing is said about whether or not the scientists or Toad managed to get back to Earth, but I guess they don't come under the Avengers' saving duties for the day. This wraps up Wanda's first entanglement with witchcraft and love. Her relationship with Archon will crop up again in a later issue, though it didn't become a long-lasting entanglement, probably due to her upcoming relationship with Vision. This first attempt at romance is very much a Beauty and the Beast type moment, with Wanda trying to teach Archon to love. And, it's got its problematic elements in that, he kidnaps her, he doesn't listen to her, he's toxic. But it's an interesting story that could have progressed had they chosen to go down this route. I do think that Wanda very much has the capacity, and most Marvel heroines at this time, to have kind of a darker romance where they, have one with a villain. We saw that with Sue Storm, with Namor, and sometimes with Doom. We also saw this with Jan at times. But I think that Marvel obviously just wasn't willing to go down this route, since heroes are heroes and villains are villains at this stage. We don't have the multifaceted villains of the modern day. It kind of echoes the way that Wanda and Doom's relationship goes later, like we haven't really moved on. I do love this storyline, even though Wanda's a damsel in distress, just because I think it signals where she's going as a character. the witchcraft, her desperately wanting to see the good in people. You know, that's the same way she feels about her brother and sometimes her father. I think that struggle echoes where she's going as a character. On the next episode, I will be talking about Wanda's later adventures as an Avenger, and we'll be obviously recapping the Scarlet Witch book. I hope you enjoyed the episode. This has been Into the Wandaverse, hosted by Hannah Gardner. You can find me over on TikTok or Instagram at Into the Wandaverse or The Wandaverse. This podcast is produced, edited, and tolerated by producer Nick. Make sure you go and give him some love on his TikTok and pressure him into finally posting on there. Podcast art by ghoulaxyart. Music by Melody Ray Griffiths. And as always, stay magical. Thank you. Next time I'll just bring my phone over here. Yeah. Because we do this every time. Yeah. Or I could just write the credits into the script, couldn't I? Yeah. You love me.
Sure.
Yeah, I knew that was going to be the response.